If there's one thing in this world I know I'm good at, it's giving people book recommendations. I may doubt myself when it comes to other things, but I know I always have the right book recommendation whenever someone asks me. So today I'm going to be giving you some hyper-specific book recommendations based on your requests. I've seen lots of people do this video and it seems like a lot of fun, and I just feel like I haven't given any book recommendations for a while, so it feels like it's time, and this is a new way to do it. Usually I just come up with a genre or a category or something and give recommendations based on that, but today we're going to be doing it based on your specific requests, and they are very specific, hyper specific to be exact. Before we get into all the book recommendations, I do want to thank the sponsor for today's video, which is Waterdrop. Waterdrop is a water purification brand that is dedicated to improving the drinking water quality in your home. Having a good water filter is really important to me, and I've been absolutely loving the Waterdrop electric filter. It's so easy to use and lasts for 200 gallons or 3 months, so you don't have to replace the filter too often. It has a simple one-key control, so all you have to do is place your glass underneath it, press the button twice, and within 1 second the water is dispensed. The filter is also chargeable, so it will last up to 30 days on a single charge, so you also don't have to worry about charging it too often. Another great feature is that the filter is easily portable, so you can place it in a lot of different locations based on your needs and the layout of your home. You can use it for things like camping, or you can leave it in your fridge, in your kitchen somewhere, or you can just use it if you are lounging about and reading a book and you need to remind yourself to drink some water. So if you've been interested in updating your water filter system at home, be sure to check out Waterdrop. The link is in my description box below for details. So thank you again to Waterdrop for sponsoring today's video, and now without any further ado, let's get into all of the hyper-specific book recommendations. I don't know how many I have, quite a few, well over 10, and I could probably go on forever, but I tried to limit it as much as I can. So if you guys like this video and you want me to do some more in the future, be sure to follow me on my Instagram at clockwork_reads if you want to request a hyper-specific book rec. But I went on there, you guys sent in tons and tons of replies, so I went through and I looked through some of them and picked out a few books. If there are more as I'm reading this, I will continue to go through and add in a few more recommendations, but let's get started. Okay, first up, I got 2 overwhelming requests that almost everyone was asking for something like this, and the first one is a book with Avatar: The Last Airbender vibes. I think since the new show came out and since I recently made a video about it and it's been on everyone's minds, people are really getting back in the Avatar: The Last Airbender mood, and maybe you watched the horrible Netflix adaptation and now you're feeling sad and you want to read something that reminds you of it, or you just finished rewatching the original and you need some more of that same energy. What should you pick up? What should you read? And my go-to recommendation if you want a book series that feels like Avatar: The Last Airbender is one I haven't talked about for a very long time, but that is Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. I think I've only read the first 2 books, or maybe 1.5. I can't remember. It's been a really long time since I've read these, and I would have to go back and reread them to know exactly what I think about them, but the first time I read them, I loved them. I had a great time reading these, and they remind me a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender because it's a fantasy series set in a world with an elemental magic system. There's lots of politics in this fantasy world as well that's somewhat similar to the themes in Atla, and I believe that one of the romances in this series is inspired by Zutara specifically. So there you go. It has like all the bases. That was another request I got a lot, a Zutara inspired romance. I didn't realize how many Zutara shippers there were amongst you all. I say this as someone who also ships Zutara, although I have many qualms with that side of the fandom, but that's a problem for another day. But anyway, if you're looking for all of those things, Truth Witch has them all. I believe there are 5 or so books out in this series. I'm not sure if it's complete, to be honest with you. I read them in like 2017 or 2018. It's been a really long time. Elemental magic, found family, interesting characters. Highly recommend if you're looking for some Atla vibes post that Netflix adaptation. All right, and then the second most common request I got was something similar to Six of Crows. Everybody wants something similar to Six of Crows, and I completely understand because I also want something similar to Six of Crows, which is hard to find because that's such a good series. So I feel you on that. But I do have a recommendation for this, and it's a series that nobody ever talks about. I believe there are 3 or 4 books in this series. I've only read the first 2 again. I do have the 3rd one, I just still haven't read it yet. And I read these again, I think around the time I read Truth Witch, so a very long time ago, but I loved this. And to this day, I hear nobody talking about it, and that is The Last Magician series by Lisa Maxwell. This has a little bit of the found family element that Six of Crows has, and it also has characters who kind of come together and have to go on this heist. There's a magic system in this world, there's time travel, which is a little bit different. It's urban fantasy instead of high fantasy, story, but thematically it is somewhat similar to Six of Crows, and the vibes are there, and I think that's the most important thing. If I were to give comp titles, I would say it's similar to Six of Crows, obviously, but also a little bit similar to The Diviners by Luba Bray, because it takes place in New York in the early 1900s. So it's kind of similar to both of them, actually. If you liked either of those, I really think you like this series. But again, extremely underrated. Absolutely nobody talks about it, but it's a fantastic YA fantasy series that has a lot of very similar elements to a lot of people's favorite series. So I know a lot of people recommend The Gilded Wolves. I read that one a long time ago. I didn't like it the first time I read it, but I feel like I'd have to reread it to know for sure. But this one would be my recommendation if you're looking for something similar. Okay, so someone is looking for a book that has creepy Midwest vibes and supernatural elements. For this, I'm going to recommend a book that I actually personally didn't love, just because I think it wasn't my thing, but I do understand why people like it so much, so I still feel fine recommending this book, and that is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. So technically this one is set in Kentucky, which is I think more southern than it is Midwestern, but it's in somewhat of the same region, but it hits all of the other marks exactly. It's Southern Gothic, and it's set in this creepy old haunted house. There are ghosts and supernatural elements in this story as well. It has those small town vibes, and it's a bit dark and mysterious, and this definitely hits most of those marks, so I think this would be something that you might be interested in trying out. Okay, next up we have a cozy book to read while on holiday in the Scottish Highlands. Easily have to give this to A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This is the perfect book to read in the Scottish Highlands. This is a fantasy duology inspired by Scottish folklore that is set in a fictionalized fantasy version of Scotland, and it has romance and a little bit of magic, and it's a fantastic duology. I really enjoyed these books, and I think it would be the absolute perfect thing to pick up if you're visiting the Scottish Highlands. Okay, this person wants a blue cover where there's no happy ending, but it's still a happy story. And I got you. A Man Called Uva by Frederick Bachman is the perfect fit. This is a very sad story, but ultimately a very happy story at its core, and also a very funny story, but it will still make you sob your eyes out. It's a book I read 2 years ago now, and I think about it constantly. There's also a movie adaptation for this book that I watched this year, not the American version that stars Tom Hanks called A Man Called Otto. Do not watch it. It's not good. It was very bad, actually. But the original Swedish version called A Man Called Uva is fantastic. I watched it at the beginning of this year. Oh my god, the movie was perfect. An absolute perfect adaptation of this wonderful book, so highly recommend that. Then I highly recommend reading this book as well if you want to cry, but not the kind of cry that like destroys you for months on end, the kind that kind of feels like a relief. Alternatively, if you want something that also has a blue cover that will make you cry, that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. My copy is blue, at least, and I read this year. It's one of the only 4 books I've read this year. We don't need to talk about it, but it's differently sad than A Man Called Uva, and honestly to me it was more disturbing than it was crying your eyes out at 3 a.m. sad. Overall, I would say it's less happy than that book is, but I do think at the end of the day it's still a hopeful book. There is still that like light at the end of the tunnel. It's not that all-encompassing grief that leaves you like gasping for breath at the end. So there is a hopefulness to the end of this story, but I would still say that this one's a bit more sad. I don't want to say more sad, differently sad than A Man Called Uva is, but you can pick either one. Both of them pretty devastating books, but still hopeful at the end of the day. Okay, this person is looking for obsessive codependent female friendships, borderline sapphic. It can only really go to one thing. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. This is borderline sapphic, obsessive, codependent female friendship to a T. There's no better way to describe this book, actually. That should just be written on the back, just so everyone knows exactly what they're getting into. This is one of my favorite books I've read. I absolutely love it. It's weird, it's dark, it's for the girls who get it, and if you get it, I'm so sorry, but I see your pain. Okay, next, this person is looking for a book that isn't talked about a lot with an academia setting and gay kids doing shady shit. I don't have a physical copy of this book, but absolutely my recommendation for this would have to be These Violent Delights. This book is the epitome of academia setting with gay kids doing shady shit. I described this book when I first read it as the epitome of be gay, do crime. That's literally all it is. I had a wonderful time reading this book. I think it's really well written. I like the mystery element of it, and it is the epitome of like toxic, will they, won't they, are they gonna kiss each other or kill each other, betrayal, like all of the good elements of like a fun toxic romance, plus murder, crime, and dark academia. So yeah, this checks all the boxes. definitely check this book out. Next up, we have You Found Out Your Friend of 3 Years Has Liked You the Entire Time. A very tragic experience, but absolutely my book rec has to be People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is the plot of the book. I mean, it's definitely a little bit different than that, but essentially that's pretty much the plot of the book. But if you're looking for that friends to lovers romance where one of them has liked the other the whole time but never really admitted it to them, and then you kind of find out and you didn't expect it, it's the book for you. It's the only one I think I've read that kind of hits those points. Okay, next up we have a book about mommy issues and immigrant families. It's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. Mommy issues, immigrant families, beautiful prose. I sound like that one sound that's like club, bus, not a club, but that's basically what it is. Almost all of the lit fic that I read is some form of mommy issues slash parental issues with immigrant families. It's like the only thing I like to read in lit fic, but this is like the #1 mommy issues book, I think. This and Woman Eating as well, both of them very heavy-handed with the mommy issues. But yeah, I absolutely love this book, couldn't recommend it enough, and everyone should read it. It's very sad, it hurts my heart, but it's fantastic. Next up, we have sad girl horror, which I feel like is exactly what I want to read all the time. My #1 rec for sad girl horror absolutely has to go to Juniper and Thorn. Horror, gothic, disturbing, weird. It's for the sad weird girls. It really is. My #2 recommendation has to be Woman Eating, which I just mentioned, because this is definitely sad girl horror. She is sad, she's a vampire, and there are lots of horror elements. 2 of my favorite books I've ever read, and I love anything in this genre, so honestly, if you have any recommendations for me, I will take them gladly. I would love to read some more sad girl horror books. This one is fairy tale folklore inspired, lots of gothic elements, horror elements. It's definitely a darker, more disturbing book. It explores themes of trauma, so definitely look up content warnings if you decide to read it. And then this one is lit fic, but she's a vampire and deals with mommy issues and eating disorders. Fantastic book. Both of them are so good. Highly, highly recommend. Give me all the sad girl horror. All right, next, somebody is looking for something short and important that you won't soon forget. So for short and memorable, 3 things come to mind. First, we have The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This is a pretty short book. I read this in college for the first time, I think my freshman year, and I have been obsessed with it ever since. It's something I've truly never stopped thinking about since the first time I read it, and I do think that as far as classic novels go, it's definitely required reading. My second recommendation for this is one of my favorite books of all time, and that is The Little Prince. I adore this book with every fiber of my being. It's very short. I think it's a very important story. Again, the type of thing that has stuck with me my entire life. It's technically a children's book, but is it really? And that's like one of my favorite genres. Stories that defy genre, that defy age category, and this is definitely one of those. And then lastly, if you're looking for something short, like very, very short that you can read in probably like 10 minutes. I have a short story recommendation, which is The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin. One of my favorite short stories of all time. I read this in 2019, I think, because of the BTS Spring Day music video. Yes, that is exactly why I read it. And I'm so glad that I did, because first of all, it introduced me to Ursula K. Le Guin, who's an author I've wanted to read for a very long time, and also because it's a fantastic story. It's been a long time since I've read it, so I don't remember the exact length of it, but it's very short and definitely the type of thing that will stick with you. All right, next we have someone looking for books for / about corporate girlies in their 20s trying to make it through the day. I have the perfect book for you. Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter is what you are looking for. Specifically, if you are a tech corporate girly, this one is absolutely for you. Be warned. I recommended this to all of my friends who I know who work in tech. Everything that they've ever described to me about their lives, their day-to-day work lives, is exactly this book. So I'm sure it'll be very real for them. But even as someone who's not a tech girly or a corporate girly, it was still very real to me. But yeah, if you are a corporate girly and you're trying to make it through the day and you are struggling, you are not alone. And this book will make you feel both very comforted and seen, but it will also make you sit there and stare at the wall for hours on end because you don't know what to do with yourself. So highly recommend if you're looking for that kind of existential crisis. Okay, next we have probably my favorite request I have gotten on here, because I have been waiting for this moment. This person wants books for reformed Sarah J. Maas readers. Girl, I got you. I was literally made for this, and I have the perfect book recommendation. It's a book that I recommended countless times before. Okay, it's not something that you haven't heard of, but if you are getting out of reading Sarah J Maas books, and that was kind of the only thing you were exposed to, and you're in that like YA to new adult category, and you're in that like zone in between those two. I haven't read Crescent City, so I don't really know what she's doing with those, but I'm thinking about like the Throne of Glass people, right? Like the people who are really into that series slash then got into ACOTAR. I know what you need, and I know how to solve all of your problems, and it's by reading An Ember in the Ashes. This is what you're missing. This will change your life. I'm pretty sure I've said this in like at least one other video before, but probably at least a few times now. This book is everything the Sarah J Maas fans want, just 10 times better. It's 10 times better. It's everything that that series has, specifically Throne of Glass at least. It's everything that that series has, except it's just actually good. Now, I'm not saying that if you're reading like ACOTAR for the fairy smut that you're gonna get something out of this, because you won't. That's not the same. The romance, the angst, the enemies to lovers, the fantasy, the overthrowing of the evil empire government. It's all in here, and it's executed exceptionally, okay? You need it. Please. And she has a new book coming out that is set in the same universe, but after this series now, so we're getting a new book in the Ember in the Ashes universe. So if you're looking for more, like, we have new ones coming out too. Please give Sabaa Tahir all of the fame that Sarah J Maas has, because she deserves it. That's my recommendation if you're more of like a Throne of Glass reader. If you're more of an ACOTAR reader, I don't have as accurate of a comp title for you because I actually enjoyed parts of Throne of Glass. But ACOTAR, like, I personally don't see the appeal, and so I don't read things like that in general, so I have fewer things to recommend to you. But if you're looking for fun fairy stories, like fae stories that are adult, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This story's great. It's a fun time. There's a great romance in it. The characters are interesting. It's not smutty the way that the ACOTAR series is. If you're reading it for that, I'm so sorry, I can't help you. I don't have any recommendations for you. Read some fan fiction. That's my recommendation for you. But if you're reading because you like fae and you're into that, then definitely pick this up. This series is so good. I absolutely love the first book. I really need to read the second one now. Otherwise, in terms of like character dynamics, relationship dynamics, and like world building, I can't even compare them because it feels unfair to An Ember in the Ashes, I mean, but this will always be my go-to. This is what you're missing in your lives, okay? And fix that. Okay, next up, this person is looking for a book that makes them feel like you're 12 reading The Hunger Games for the first time. Now, this is dependent on which element of The Hunger Games we're talking about, but I'm going with like the general themes of the story and the world that the story is set in, this post-apocalyptic dystopian universe. And if that's what we're going with, I absolutely have to recommend The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. I've talked about this book so many times, but this is the first book I read since reading The Hunger Games that made me sit there and think the way that reading The Hunger Games for the first time made me think. This was an eye-opening book for me in terms of the genre of dystopian. It really changed the way I perceived the genre, which is interesting because it's definitely one of the oldest books I've read in the genre besides 1984, but it's by far the best one I have ever read, the best dystopian post-apocalyptic book I have ever read. It's so well executed and there are so many layers to this story. So highly recommend if you are now an adult who grew up reading The Hunger Games and that book changed your life as a kid the way that it did for me. And while it still continues to do so, you're looking for something new, something a little bit older, this is the one. If you haven't read it, you absolutely need to. All right, and then lastly, this person is looking for gay vampires with 2 exclamation marks. So this is very serious, and I'm very serious about this as well. And so my recommendation for this has to be A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a retelling of Dracula from the perspective of one of his wives, and it is sapphic, and it is gothic, and dark, and vampiric, obviously, and it's phenomenal. This is one of the books that really got me into reading more gothic fantasy and gothic books in general and horror, and it really helped me delve into that genre, which I hadn't read much from before. This is like my favorite vampire book I've read, potentially this and Woman Eating. I really do feel like vampires are back in a big way, and I want to read more vampire books, so if you have any recommendations for me too, please do let me know. But this is definitely my recommendation for gay vampires. You will not be disappointed. But there you all have it. That is it for my hyper-specific book recommendations based on your requests. I hope you all enjoyed watching this video. I had a really great time making it. This was actually a lot of fun. It's been a while since I've done a video where I kind of got to interact with you guys to make the video, so maybe I'll do some more things like this this in the future. But if you would like to see a part 2 to this, be sure to follow me on my Instagram to see the next time where I post a question so that you can submit your requests, and let me know in the comments down below too if it's something you would like to see. I also thought it would be kind of fun if I gave you all a request and you can give me recommendations, because a request I got frequently from a lot of you was books that feel like a Hosier song. And I love Hosier. He's literally one of my favorite artists of all time. And while I do have a couple of recommendations I could probably give for this, I feel like nothing feels quite right exactly. So if you have any Hosier recommendations for me, any books that feel like a Hosier song, any specific song or a specific album, or just generally like his discography, please let me know. I would love your recommendations because I want to read anything that feels like a Hosier song, because I would like to live in Unreal Earth specifically. Well, not really, because that album is so depressing, but you know, in the vibes of that album. That would be ideal for me. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you'd like to follow me on any of my social media, all my links are in the description box as always. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!